LCM, and I hope you guys all have a really good time at this debate.
This will be my first time chairing, so I hope we all have a great time and have an exciting and fruitful debate.
We're going to start with a brief sort of update on some of the facts of the WTO, because the WTO is very much a topic of conversation. So when the U.S. is the plaintiff, when they're bringing the case, they win 87% of the time. However, they lose 75% of the time when they're defending. But this is actually kind of in accordance with a lot of cases. So anytime a person is defending, anytime a country is defending in the WTO, it's very often that they lose.
Hurry's going to go over some rules and procedure, and then we're going to get started.
Now, in order to propose a moderated caucus, you need to have two things. You need to have a topic, and you need to have a speaking time. Now, the unmoderated caucus, as the name suggests, is unmoderated. We're not calling on anyone. We're not really doing anything. So the unmoderated caucus is unstructured time. So the way that these two would work is if you yield to another delegate, say, I am speaking. And I'm done speaking, but I have 30 seconds left in my speaking time, and I want to let Sarah speak also. I'll say that I would yield to her, and she would have the remaining time in my speech. Finally, comments. Essentially, your fellow delegates will be able to have a commentary on your speech. So yeah, that is it for yields. I'd just like to remind you that you only have to yield if you are speaking from the speakers list, which we're going to, it's pretty self-explanatory. You'll see how it works in a minute. But if you're speaking in a moderated caucus, then there would be no need for yield. So yeah, that is the basic rules of procedure that you'll need to know for this debate.
Okay, also yields, please do not abuse them.
Motion to open debate.
By discretion of the chair, this motion passes. We are now in debate. We need to do what is known as a policy round. So each country will essentially go around the room, and each person will give, say, a 30-second to 1 minute speech about what your policy is for the general debate.
Argentina has two major issues that it would like to address. First, tariffs. Tariffs are a big problem and they cause disputes within countries.
We should mostly focus on the classification and development and protection of undeveloped countries, because that is a major issue in today's life.
The rules are more geared toward developed countries, and we would like more protections for developing countries. Thank you.
New Zealand would like to recognize the fact that countries like China have been using the WTO to call themselves a developing country. This is unacceptable. Thank you.
Saudi Arabia.
Esteemed diplomats, honorable chair. Today we are assembled here as members of the World Trade Organization. Also, how can any country other than themselves declare the state of their nation? How can you know the state of my country's people? And this isn't cheating the system. It's called being humane. And finally, I have 3 words. Currency manipulation. Unacceptable. Thank you.
The UK would like to focus on protections for developing countries, as we have enjoyed working with developing countries before. We would also like to focus on currency manipulation, more specifically the motives behind it.
Why should South Africa be able to tell a country like China or Brazil whether they are developed or not? China and Brazil know their own people.
If you travel to China, it is plain to see that it is not an agricultural country. And they should not be able to have their cake and eat it too. They're an industrial country, and they're able to get protections for developing countries, and I think that is unfair.
So countries like China, who are for having free trade for the benefit of all, which is the goal of the WTO, believe that we do not define developing countries as countries that have problems with their government, but as countries that have agricultural needs. Thank you.
A country should not be able to decide if they're a developing country or not. A very developed country could just say, oh, I'm a developing country, and then get all these advantages. You can't just take a country at their word. You have to actually inspect the country and decide if they are developing or not.
You have a court or judges that decide if a country is developing or not.
We are suffering from desertification, pollution, and very low per person salary and income per year. Why should we just be defined because of our GDP? Shouldn't we define a developing country as one that has problems that its government cannot solve because of problems and shortage of resources?
97% of the Chinese population has access to tap water. 95% of the Chinese population have a cell phone. And 98% of the Chinese population have food to eat. And also, 6.5% of the Chinese population are in poverty. So now, as a least developed country, I know what a least developed country looks like. And I'm pretty sure a 6.5% poverty rate is not very least developed.
And Qatar has a large GDP per capita, and we're ranked number 6. Yet we still classify as a developing country due to the size of our country. Qatar is very small, and that means that our economy is not as large as countries such as China or the United States, which is why we classify as a developing country. And that should not be changed just because of our GDP per capita.
If certain countries are running low on certain things, they should be able to get the help they need in just those certain things.
We should create a panel of judges with set requirements for the classification of a developed country that dictates whether or not a country should be allowed developing country status and its privileges.
We already have a judge system for dispute settlement. As far as Saudi Arabia is concerned, that system is on the brink of failing.
Highlight Yemen's proposal that we subdivide developing countries. I would say that there should be 4 tiers. The first one is least developed. Second one is developing. The third one is emerging, which would be for countries like China. So why don't we combine those 2 ideas and have emerging, least developed, and those for the other 2 classifications, and have a judge if that country should be in which classification.
So we've been talking about sort of GDP, and that's a topic that's been coming up because when we're talking about classifications of developed versus developing versus least developed, GDP, or basically the wealth of the country, is a super important part of that debate. If we're classifying least developed versus developing versus developed, if you do make the demarcation between those 3 categories or something like that, you could also say, okay, some standards, some protections that the WTO gives developing countries can apply to those least developed, and others don't have to. So I'd say I'd encourage you to think of kind of 3 different areas. So we could think of the area of tariffs, right? The other area you could kind of think of is the time frame, so the timeline for becoming up to pace with the agreements in the WTO. The other area you could think of is just market access. So this would be like quotas. So those are all kind of areas you could think of because it doesn't have to be a one size fits all that you're either developed, developing, or least developed. You could say, what are we going to allow least developing countries or developing countries to do?
Russia, are you with us or do you need help?
I'm with you, Sam. I am. We're developing, so we can just support you, but if you guys don't use your weapon.
Anybody in this room can propose an amendment. It is written in the same format as the resolution generally without the preambulatory clauses. You don't need preambulatory clauses in an amendment. You simply need to state what exactly it is that you would change, what you would strike, and what you would add.
The United States believes that a larger group that would go into the country and then review it would be much more apt for the job, and that just a small board of judges would not really work out.
So let's say some countries do not like the status of China being a developing country. Those countries can bring that dispute to the panel of judges who will ultimately decide whether or not China, based on the requirements and restrictions, would be a developing country.
People say that China isn't a developing country, but if you're not in China, if you're not there, then how do you really know?
This motion passes. We are now in a 10-minute moderated caucus with a 30-second speaking time on the subject of amendments to the proposed resolution.
WTO consists of an appellate body which solves all disputes that have to do with trade. If we do not have judges on this body, then we can't solve any dispute, and there is no point in having a WTO if we can't solve any issues.
Big countries such as the United States or Russia could threaten smaller or poorer countries with bad trades, and the WTO really helps developing countries with making fair trade. So if the WTO were to close, poor countries and developing countries might not get fair trades.
America is the one country in this room that is blocking the judges onto this panel. Their motivations are that China is, quote, gaming the system. And in order to actually get judges through, we must be able to, one, convince America, and two, be able to lift and create open and multilateral trade so that we have a better relations over all spans.
That dispute is leading us to no longer be able to trade together without tariffs and what the WTO was originally built on. I believe that this should not happen, and it is important for us to have reforms to the current appellate body. Thank you.
The United States wishes more reform and wishes for more benefits for the United States of America from the WTO.
The U.S., in China's opinion, has only one reason for blocking these judges to the appellate body, because it has unfair biases against most of the countries represented here today. The President of the United States has called this body, this institution, a catastrophe. And his reasoning for calling this a catastrophe was saying that we don't have the judges. So the delegation from the United States is fighting unfairly to be able to block judges just because it believes that it doesn't represent its own values. The point of the WTO is not to fairly represent one or any one country's values. It is to represent all of the countries together and for every country to vote on what they believe in and reach a fair conclusion for all, not to have something only benefiting one country. So why should we let the United States keep blocking judges, even though only because they don't believe in fairness?
We are now going to vote on Argentina's motion to introduce a bill. All those in favor? This clearly passes.
And it amends the amount of countries necessary to block a judge from 1 to 3.
Allowing not only one country to repeatedly block, as we have seen so far. And it makes the appointment of the judges the first priority of the WTO.
But they have to be able to provide a strong enough reason to convince 2 other countries. The fact that it is 3 keeps it within the original spirit of the bill.
Is incredibly harmful, and we should definitely not pass this.
The United States has been blocking judges for a very long time, which disapproves of many things. And because of this, it allows 2 more people that could get convinced to also protect the judges allowed in the appellate body.
If you are in favor of this bill, please raise your placard. Raise them high.
No lobby, France.
This clearly passes. Clapping in order, right? Clapping is in order. We will now be voting for Resolution 1.0. All those in favor, please raise your placards.
Put your hands in the air like you really don't care.